Thank you for joining this virtual seminar of the Chemical Weapons Convention Coalition, otherwise known as the CWC Coalition. My name is Paul Walker, and I'm the coordinator of the CWC Coalition and the vice chair of the Arms Control Association Board. I will be your moderator today, along with Daryl Kimball, the executive director of the Arms Control Association. Also supporting us all today is Leanne Quinn, you've just heard from, our program assistant for the coalition, and Tony Fleming, the communications director of the Arms Control Association. We have an excellent group of speakers to address reinforcing the norm against chemical weapons today, and are looking forward to hearing more about the most recent CWC Conference of States Parties in The Hague, held in hybrid fashion with very limited attendance on site, but broadcast for the public on YouTube. This 25th annual meeting of states parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention, known as CSP 25 to most of us, was also split into two parts, with the first 2 days having taken place last November 30th and December 1st, and the next 3 days having taken place this past April 20 to 22nd. Before we start, let me remind everyone that the audio and video functions are working only for the speakers. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We have 4 speakers today: OPCW Director General Fernando Arias, who will offer welcoming remarks, and a panel including Canadian Ambassador Lisa Helfand, German Ambassador Gudrun Lingner, and Dr. Pascal Zanders. DG Arias will speak first, but will not be taking any questions. Our other 3 panelists will follow and will indeed be taking questions. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our first speaker, His Excellency Fernando Arias, Director General of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, in The Hague. Ambassador Arias has been the DG at the OPCW since July 2018, and was previously the Ambassador of Spain to the Netherlands and permanent representative to the OPCW from 2014 to 2018. Prior to that, he was Spanish Ambassador to the United Nations in New York, 2012 to 2013, and has held numerous diplomatic positions in China, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Mauritania, Mali, Mexico, Romania, and the Netherlands. Ambassador Arias, the virtual floor is yours now. Please take the podium.
Thank you very much, dear Paul, dear friend, dear Dr. Walker, Ambassadors Helfand and Lingner, dear Dr. Zanders, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Executive Director of the Arms Control Association, dear friends all. I'm pleased to open this event organized by the Arms Control Association and the Chemical Weapons Convention Coalition. I wish to thank Dr. Walker and the organizers for arranging this meeting in an adapted modality in those difficult times. The civil society community of non-governmental organizations, researchers, scientists, and other relevant stakeholders are essential partners in achieving the OPCW's mission and raising awareness about the risks posed by certain chemicals. The Chemical Weapons Convention, the Chemical Weapons Convention Coalition has played a critical role in this regard by coordinating and supporting civil society's engagement with the OPCWs through the Conference of the States Parties. Civil society has been a champion of the convention from before its entry into force in 1997. In the last 24 years, the OPCW has delivered concrete and significant results. With 193 states parties, the treaty covers 98% of the global population. To date, over 98% of the 72,000 metric tons of declared chemical weapons stockpiles have been verified as destroyed. Safe and steady destruction continues, and the small remaining fraction is on track to be destroyed by 2023. In recognition of the OPCW's extensive efforts, the organization received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2013. Despite this success, in the last decade, the global ban against chemical weapons has come under threat. In recent years, there have been a number of confirmed cases of chemical weapons use in Iraq, in Syria, in Malaysia, in the United Kingdom and the Russian Federation. In 2021, the OPCW entered its 8th year of engagement in the Syrian Arab Republic. The OPCW has invested a great deal of time and resources in delivering on the mandates given to the Secretariat by the states parties regarding the Syrian chemical weapons dossier. 3 special instruments are used to deliver the mandates in that country: the Declaration Assessment Team, the Fact-Finding Mission, and the Investigation and Identification Team. The Declaration Assessment Team continues to address with Syria the shortcomings found in the initial declaration of its chemical weapons program. So far, 24 rounds of consultations between the Declaration Assessment Team, or DAT, and Syria have taken place. The last one was conducted in February this year. These consultations include high-level exchanges, field visits to sites, sample taking, and interviews with the relevant staff connected to the Syrian chemical weapons program. After more than 7 years of work of the DAT, Syria's declaration related to its chemical weapons program is not yet accurate and complete. On the other hand, the fact-finding mission continues to establish facts surrounding allegations of the use of chemical weapons in Syria. To date, the fact-finding mission has investigated 77 allegations of chemical weapons use and determined 17 cases of likely or confirmed use of chemical weapons in Syria. The report of the fact-finding mission related to the incident in Duma on the 7th of April 2018 is still the object of discussion between some member states. The fact-finding mission released its report on the 1st of March 2019. In its report, the fact-finding mission concluded reasonable grounds that the use of chlorine as a weapon likely took place. Following the issuance of the fact-finding mission's report, 2 former inspectors of the Secretariat tried to portray the work of the OPCW as biased and partial. Here, I would like to highlight that one of the 2 inspectors was never a member of the fact-finding mission and supported the fact-finding mission only for a limited period of time. The other one participated in a fact-finding mission investigation for the first time, but only in a limited capacity. He could not be deployed on the field, and as he had not completed the inspector's training. Moreover, after the deployment to Duma, both of them ceased to be involved in the work of the fact-finding mission, and consequently, none of them had access to the information and analysis performed by the fact-finding mission during the critical period of more than 6 months preceding the conclusion of the fact-finding mission's investigation and publication of the report on the 1st of March 2019. None of the 193 member states of the organization have challenged the findings of the fact-finding mission that chlorine was found on the scene of the attack in Duma. I must recall that the mandate of the fact-finding mission is only to establish facts pertaining to the use of toxic chemicals as a weapon, not to identify the perpetrators. Several months before the fact-finding mission published its report related to Duma, the International and Independent Commission of Inquiry of the United Nations, the so-called Pinheiro Commission, reached the same conclusion as the fact-finding mission concerning the presence of a toxic chemical in its investigation of the Duma incident in April 2018. The above-mentioned Commission of Inquiry of the United Nations even went beyond, mentioning the presence of helicopters of the army that dropped cylinders filled with chlorine in Duma on apartment buildings. Nobody contested these conclusions either, while they go beyond those of the fact-finding mission by pointing at helicopters. 3 years after the events in Duma, I stand by the conclusion of the fact-finding mission, as I do about all the reports produced by the Secretariat of the organization. The Conference of the States Parties of the OPCW decided in 2018 to mandate the Secretariat to identify the perpetrators of chemical weapons use. The Investigation and Identification Team, also called IIT, was created in 2018 to implement this mandate. On the 8th of April 2020, the Secretariat released the first report of the IIT. The report concluded that there are reasonable grounds to believe that individuals belonging to the Syrian Arab Air Force used chemical weapons in La Tamena on 3 occasions in March 2017. Sarin was used twice and chlorine in one of the attacks. Following the issuance of the first report of the IIT, the Executive Council of the organization in July 2020 requested Syria to declare to the Secretariat within 90 days the chemical weapons used in the attack in La Tamena. And that decision, Syria was also requested to declare all the chemical weapons it currently possesses and to resolve all the outstanding issues regarding its initial declaration I already mentioned. In April 2021, the IIT issued a second report on the incident that took place in Sarakib, Syria, in February 2018. The report reached the conclusion that there are reasonable grounds to believe that a military helicopter of the Syrian Arab Air Force hit Sarakib by dropping at least 1 cylinder of chlorine. In April 2021, the Conference of the State Parties of the organization suspended the rights of Syria to vote in the Conference and in the Executive Council, to stand for election in the Executive Council, and to hold any office in the Conference, in the Council, or any subsidiary body. Unfortunately, chemical weapons have also been used recently in other parts of the world. In 2018, a chemical of the family of Novichok was used as a weapon in Salisbury and in Amesbury in the United Kingdom. 5 individuals were directly poisoned, one of whom fatally. The Secretariat dispatched a team of experts at the request of the United Kingdom, and working independently, confirmed the findings of the United Kingdom regarding the chemical formula of the nerve agent used. Following these events, the Conference of the States Parties decided to include new chemicals in the list of the most dangerous chemicals of the organization, called the Schedule 1. It was the first time that this list was amended since the entry into force of the convention. On the 20th of August last year, a Russian citizen and political activist, Mr. Alexei Navalny, was poisoned in Russia. In response to a request from Germany, a team of experts from the Secretariat independently collected in Berlin biomedical samples from Mr. Navalny with his consent for analysis by the Opcw designated laboratories. The results of the analysis confirmed that traces of a chemical of the Novichok family were found in Mr. Navalny's blood, with similar structural characteristics as the toxic chemicals that were added to the above mentioned list called Schedule 1. On the 6th of October, the Secretariat received a request from the Russian Federation for a technical assistance visit concerning the same incident. All information related to this request was made available on the Opcw public website. As the request did not meet the necessary requirements for the Secretariat to assist Russia in a way similar to other states parties, the visit did not take place. The destruction of the declared chemical weapons will come to an end soon, very soon, but the threat is still there. It will require sustained vigilance against the re-emergence of chemical weapons. The project to construct a Center for Chemistry and Technology, or Chemtech Center, is progressing well. You can see here the picture of the final design of the building. The center will be a leader in international cooperation, research, analysis, training, and capacity building. It will allow us to keep pace with developments in science and technology, and to ensure that our robust verification regime incorporates and benefits from technological advancements. The funding target for the construction of the Chemtech Center has now been met, but the trust fund remains open for further contributions to finance certain equipments and programs. I would like to express my appreciation to all the donors whose contributions have enabled this significant achievement. And I'm very proud to see here in this meeting the ambassadors of Canada and Germany, countries that have been very supportive and very generous with their financial contributions. The Kentum Center construction is currently planned to be finished at the end of 2022, and the construction will start this summer. We are preparing a dossier of programs to be carried out in the center since the beginning, and I have started informal consultations with states parties to incorporate their priorities. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as we count down to mark the 25th anniversary of the organization in 2022, we need to acknowledge that our world today is very different to the one in 1997 when it was founded. To meet the challenges, it is imperative for us to keep adapting and evolving in an ever-changing global landscape. Preventing re-emergence will require the commitment and efforts of all stakeholders, of all of us, civil society, governments, and chemical industry. Thank you very much to all of you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Arias. That was very helpful and very informative. We most welcome you to staying with us as long as your schedule allows. Let me now introduce our first panelist, Her Excellency Lisa Helfand, Ambassador of Canada to the Netherlands and permanent representative to the Opcw since October 2019. Ambassador Helfand has also served as the Director General of the Consular Operation Bureau. She joined the Canadian Department of External Affairs in 1989 and has served as ambassador in Hungary, Slovenia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Ambassador Helfand, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you all for your attendance today. I'm really pleased to be here. Canada understands and values the importance of civil society participation in all aspects of social, economic, and political life. It's not possible to achieve the goal of ridding the world of chemical weapons without the full participation of civil society. The objectives we've set for ourselves in the CWC and the decisions we take as state parties are merely words until we put them into action. Your outreach, your engagement, and your support to the people and communities affected by chemical weapons make you an indispensable partner. It's important that you're part of the conversations taking place at the OPCW, and that's why Canada has supported civil society participation in the CSP. Since 2017, we've provided over 400,000 Canadian dollars for travel to The Hague and other related activities. This includes broadening awareness of the CWCC, promoting gender inclusion in your activities, hosting side events and meetings, and enhancing the coalition's online presence, which is particularly important in a pandemic. Speaking of the pandemic, it is unfortunate the NGOs weren't able to attend the CSP this year, but I was pleased to see so many of you submitted statements. We've read through them, we've heard your concerns, and I'm glad today's event gives us an opportunity to have a conversation. For my time with you today, I'll share with you the top 3 successes, as I see them, of the last CSP, and the top 3 challenges that lie ahead. From our perspective, CSP 25 was very successful, and this was in no small part due to the importance of the decisions before the conference. First, as you know, and as you heard from the DG, at CSP 25, we adopted a decision to revoke Syria's rights and privileges under the convention. Syria has now had its rights suspended to vote at the CSP and Executive Council, to stand for election to the Council, and to hold any office of the CSP, the Executive Council, or any subsidiary organs. Syria does, however, retain its rights to speak in both policy-making organs. The conference adopted the decision with 87 yes votes, 15 no votes, and 35 abstentions. Support for the draft decision exceeded our expectations, despite the challenging circumstances and the efforts by some states parties to undermine it. This is the first time in the OPCW's history a states party's rights and privileges have been revoked. We regret that it had to come to this. After 8 years of encouraging Syria to cooperate, action was required to show that non-compliance with the convention does have consequences. 5 EC decisions express concern with the use of chemical weapons in Syria since 2013. A team of the best experts has been assigned to help Syria complete its declaration. Instead of the number of issues decreasing over the years, they've increased. 8 cases of chemical weapons use were attributed to the Syrian regime from 2013 until now. It was time to take the next step. This decision is not a permanent measure. When Syria completes the requirements outlined in the July 2020 EC decision, it may regain its rights and privileges, and we hope that it will. Our main objective is to verifiably disarm Syria of chemical weapons. The decision was a necessary step towards this goal. The second success at CSP 25 was the adoption of the budget. The budget should not be a contentious issue, but as you know, it has become one since the creation of the IIT team in 2018. Because the budget contains funds for the IIT, some parties choose to vote against it and protest against the decision by the conference to define attribution as part of the OPCW's mandate. However, we're happy that after the first vote on the budget after the IIT decision, we have seen growing support for the budget. Votes in favor of the budget have increased steadily since 2018. This reflects the importance states parties place on the proper functioning of the OPCW, and it's an implicit recognition that attribution is now a widely accepted part of the OPCW's mandate. Given the use of chemical weapons in recent years, it is important that the OPCW be able to identify the perpetrators based on sound evidence. We're glad to see that more and more states agree with that position. The third success I'd like to discuss is not directly related to the CSP, but it's important to mention, and the DG has already discussed it. The OPCW Center for Chemistry and Technology, the ChemTech Center, has met its fundraising target in the period between Parts 1 and Part 2 of the CSP. Canada was an early supporter of the project. We've actively fundraised for it through the G7-led global partnership and as a co-chair with Indonesia of an informal Friends of the Lab group. We've also contributed 10 million Canadian dollars or 6.5 million euros to this project, making us the top bilateral donor. With the fundraising complete, the ChemTech Center is scheduled to break ground, as you heard, with plans for it to be ready by the end of 2023. The ChemTech Center will help the OPCW meet the challenges of the future. With the fundraising for the construction of the building now complete, attention is turning to the type of research, activities, and programs the center should offer. And we're keen to hear your views on this project. I'll now turn my attention to the top 3 challenges ahead of us. First, we cannot look to the future without being concerned about emerging threats from chemical weapons, as we must be on our guard, ready to act. One of the most dangerous threats out there are Novichoks. In the span of 2 years, Novichoks were used twice in targeted attacks in the UK and in Russia. They're a Soviet-era nerve agent developed in the 70s. Minimal quantities of these harmful weapons can cause tremendous harm to people, communities, and the environment. In 2019, Canada, the US, and the Netherlands jointly led the listing of 2 families of Novichoks at CSP 24. The decision was adopted by consensus and subjected these 2 families of chemicals to declaration and verification by the OPCW. But other types of Novichoks exist, and they are not yet listed, and therefore they remain beyond the OPCW's declaration and verification regimes. For example, the specific chemical used to poison Alex Navalny is not yet listed. This particular poisoning is still an unexplained case of chemical weapons use. Russia has yet to open an investigation to clarify the circumstances of the attack. We are disappointed that Russia didn't avail itself in good faith of a technical assistance visit from the Technical Secretariat. Canada will continue to demand accountability for chemical weapons use in this and all cases. We must all do so. We're also concerned about the harm of central nervous system acting chemicals in their aerosolized form for law enforcement purposes. CWC forbade the aerosolized use of CNS acting chemicals for law enforcement purposes and has stated it's inconsistent as a purpose not prohibited. In other words, aerosolized CNS acting chemicals cannot be controlled enough to be safely used for domestic law enforcement. This was confirmed by the OPCW Scientific Advisory Board. The EC has adopted a decision to this effect in March 2021. Its aim is to prevent these dangerous chemicals from being used in law enforcement with potentially deadly consequences. We hope that the November CSP will approve this decision. Second, we remain concerned with certain actors challenging the integrity, impartiality, and professionalism of the Technical Secretariat. Attacks and disinformation campaigns are ongoing, particularly regarding the Syria fact-finding missions. In the lead up to the vote on the recent Syria decision, 2 events were organized that tried to portray the evidence collected by the IIT as untrustworthy. We are concerned these narratives have gotten some traction in casting doubt on Syria missions, in particular amongst those who do not follow the OPCW and its work closely. However, despite long-running efforts to undermine the OPCW, trust in the Technical Secretariat among the vast majority of states parties remains strong. The OPCW has navigated this difficult situation very well, but we must use the opportunities at our disposal to emphasize our trust in the Technical Secretariat and reiterate the facts. Last but not least on the list of challenges is Syria's incomplete declaration. During the last CSP, the DG informed the conference that outstanding issues in Syria's declaration rose from 19 to 20. This is a very disappointing development. The concerns of substance in Syria's declaration date back to when it first joined the convention in 2013. They are several hundred tons of chemical warfare agents and thousands of chemical munitions that are unaccounted for. Indicators of 3 undeclared chemical warfare agents are unsubstantiated. And unknown quantities of chemical warfare agents that were likely weaponized or produced have not been declared. This is not the standard to which we collectively aspire. Syria has made some progress completing its declaration over the past few years, but it is still incomplete and leaves many important questions unanswered. This remains a threat to the convention. We must continue pressing Syria to declare the remaining stockpiles it still possesses and dismantle its capabilities to deploy and produce them again. Thank you for your time. I look forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Helfand. That was excellent. We will now turn the virtual floor over to Her Excellency Gudrun Lingner, Ambassador of Germany to the Netherlands and Permanent Representative to the Opcw since July 2020. Previously, Ambassador Lingner has been Deputy Secretary of Germany for Franco-German cooperation, and she joined the Foreign Service in 1998 and has served both in Singapore and Paris. Ambassador Lingner, if you would turn on your video, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Director General, dear fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, or rather good morning. I don't know, it depends where you are. Let me start by thanking Paul Walker, the CWC Coalition and the Arms Control Association for inviting me to this very important and interesting discussion. And above all, I'd like to thank you, all participants, for taking the time and for your continued interest. This is of huge importance. As Ambassador Helfand, my dear colleague, has just said, the support of civil society in defending the Chemical Weapons Convention is essential. Us governments, the Opcw and NGOs, we all have a common goal and none of us can reach it without the implication of the other. So really, I am tremendously grateful for having the opportunity to discuss with you the outcome of the last conference of the states parties in the CSP 25, which ended about, what, 2 weeks ago. Very much like the Canadian government, Germany has always supported NGO participation at CSPs. We have sponsored travel costs. We have also regularly organized possibilities for exchange during the CSP. And I really hope that I will be able at the upcoming CSP to host a reception for all participating NGOs again, as my predecessor has done in the past. Now, Lisa has given you a very comprehensive overview on what we have achieved at CSP 25 and the main challenges that lie at hand. I really very much agree with what she said. Actually, my concept for the remarks I was invited to give today looks a lot like the presentation just made by the Canadian ambassador. And while this certainly represents a challenge for me as a speaker at this particular time of the webinar, because I do not want to bore you with repetition, it also provides us a very important and I believe positive message. It shows how wide and how deep the consensus on the chemical weapons dossier in Syria has grown in the past years. Many governments have cooperated with rare trust for this common goal, sharing information and engaging others. And in the end, after years of working together and talking to states parties all over the world, the CSP 25 has succeeded in adopting a historic decision by a huge majority of states parties, thereby sending a very clear message. As Lisa said, 87 states parties voted in favor of the Syria decision, only 15 voted against. This is encouraging, I believe. It shows that multilateralism can work, it can produce results. So many states parties across regional groups were ready to stand up at the last CSP and to say enough is enough to a states party that has failed to comply with its obligations for over 7 years. That is a very meaningful statement. It gives us the example, an encouraging example, that the international community can achieve something together. Clearly, non-proliferation regimes are not just obscure legal texts. We can bring them to life, and we did. The decision on Syria was historic. For the first time since the Chemical Weapons Convention entered into force 24 years ago, Article 12 CWC was applied in response to non-compliance by a signatory state. Now, some critics of the adopted decision will say that the decision addressing the possession and use of chemical weapons by the Syrian Arab Republic against its own population is not legitimate. They claim that it was taken outside the mandate of the CWC. Let me be clear. The CWC foresees voting as a method of decision-making in both policy-making organs, the Executive Council and the Conference of States Parties. The legal provisions are crystal clear, and all sovereign states accepted them when they signed and ratified the convention. So please do not let yourselves be fooled. The claims that it was ultra vires or even illegal for the OPCW to establish an investigation and identification team are not justified by legal grounds. And of course, we all know to prevent the re-emergence of chemical weapons. The use of chemical weapons by anyone, be it a state or a non-state actor, anywhere and at any time, under any circumstances, is a violation of international law and can amount to the most serious of crimes of international concern, war crimes and crimes against humanity. Such acts must have consequences. This leads me to a very important question. Where do we go from here? Well, many things could be said in response to this question. And again, Lisa has already outlined the main challenges for our future work within the OPCW. I would now like to draw your attention to two areas outside the OPCW, stricto sensu, where close cooperation between civil society and governments is of utmost importance. Let me start by mentioning briefly a documentary named The Cave. Some of you might know it. The French and the Danish delegations have organized as a side event to CSP 25 the possibility to watch this highly acclaimed documentary. It was filmed in an underground clinic in Eastern Ghouta between 2016 and 2018, and it shows the atrocities of a merciless 5-year siege against Al-Ghouta. This film reminds us of the suffering of over 400,000 civilians fighting for survival in unimaginable circumstances. Towards the end of the film, another horrific attack with chlorine and directed straight at the hospital forces the courageous doctors of the cave to evacuate and close down their clinic. Anyone who has seen these unbearable pictures of living hell, called the weapons attack, can never. They are certainly staff who are very young and incredibly brave if there is any space for justice. Well, this question is very important indeed. Delegates at CSP 25 had a possibility to talk with Dr. Balur and one of her fellow doctors who lives like her in exile now. And from the exchanges and their interventions during the discussion, I keep the very strong feeling that seeking justice is the only way to help them and other victims overcome the unbearable trauma of a chemical weapons attack. This spring, we have witnessed a decade of war in the Syrian Arab Republic, a war in which 12 million of Syrian women, men, girls, and boys have lost their homes, and hundreds of thousands of Syrians have lost their lives. Unimaginable crimes have been committed, including the use of chemical weapons. I am convinced that all of you want to stand by the victims of chemical weapons attacks, and I know that many of you are engaged in helping the victims in Syria. I have seen with a lot of interest that civil society actors have taken to European courts, launching criminal complaints against those responsible for chemical weapons attacks in Syria. They have done so in Germany and in France. I know that the German Office of the Federal Prosecutor is in direct contact with the NGOs who can help gathering evidence. In my view, this is a very encouraging development. In February, a German court in the city of Koblenz sentenced a former Syrian Secret Service agent to almost 5 years in prison for aiding and abetting crimes against humanity. In this case, it was torture. Well, I would like to underline that also the states party to the CWC convention try to do their bit by allowing information sharing between IIT and FFM on one side, and the UN mechanism established in Geneva, the IIIM, a body which assists in the investigation and prosecution of persons responsible for the most serious crimes under international law committed in Syria since 2011. We must go further in this endeavor. We owe it to the victims. Even if perpetrators are very slim. But I must underline that this endeavor would have to be pursued in other fora. It cannot be done within the OPCW. This would be not within our mandate. The second area where I would welcome enhanced cooperation with civil society actors is the ongoing, let me be brave and say, propaganda war, waged by a relatively small group against the OPCW, claiming that they speak on behalf of the entire international civil society. I think that governments and NGOs alike must step up their efforts and remain steadfast in defending the organization against disinformation and deliberate as well as baseless attacks. The discussions we had in the public domain, and Lisa just mentioned the Arias formula meetings in New York. So these discussions should not be about the OPCW, about undermining its authority and accusing it of being a puppet of the West. This is a narrative that puts into doubt the integrity and credibility of OPCW experts. It is spread by those who do not like the outcome of any independent experts' investigations, particularly when these findings, published by the United Nations, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry, the Joint Investigation Mission, the FFM, or the IIT, when these findings do not fit certain political agendas. So the reaction is always the same: denial, attacking the legitimacy of the experts, undermining their authority. In short, the strategy is throwing mud again and again, even when clear answers have been given to all questions, but throwing mud, hoping that something might stick. This is dangerous, and it is wrong. Our engagement within the OPCW should not aim at defending states that come under negation of the OPCW. It must be about protecting people against attacks with chemical weapons and about holding those responsible for the attacks. Only those who want to protect perpetrators can have an interest in destroying the credibility of an organization through the repetition of false news. Anyone who really does not want to accept the use of chemical weapons needs to take a stance and defend the truth in every specific case, not only in general, anywhere, anytime, and under any circumstances. Options. And one thing is sure, and that's why I'm also insisting on this point, governments cannot do this alone. We do need active NGOs, real experts that put their expertise and considerable knowledge out there to the large public. So I'd like to end this intervention by appealing to all of you. The OPCW and its technical secretariats are the international community's best bet to uphold the ban on chemical weapons. We must defend the Chemical Weapons Convention, this key instrument of global non-proliferation and the disarmament architecture. I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lingner. That was excellent. We will now turn the virtual floor over to Dr. Jean-Pascal Zanders, the founder and director of The Trench. Dr. Zanders is an expert in arms control, disarmament, non-proliferation, global security, and is an inaugural member of the OPCW Advisory Board on Education and Outreach, what we call the ABEO, where he has served since 2016, including ABEO chairman until 2019. He's also worked at the European Union, Institute for Security Studies in Paris, and the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, what we call SIPRI, and was director of the Bioweapons Prevention Project, the BWPP in Geneva. And since 2000, he served as an advisor to the Belgian and European Union delegations to the BWC and CWC. So Dr. Zanders, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paul. Director General Arias, Ambassador Helfand, Ambassador Lingner, and participants. I'm very pleased to join this webinar of the global non-governmental platform, the Chemical Weapons Convention Coalition. As a CWCC member from the start, I wish to express my gratitude to Paul Walker, who has been the engine behind the initiative for as long it has existed, and the states parties to the CWC that have supported the initiative, including Norway and Germany. The 25th session of the states parties has been remarkable in many ways. Not only was the meeting hobbled by the COVID-19 pandemic and forced to meet in two separate parts because of health restrictions, the OPCW also had to vote on whether to sanction one of its members under the CWC Article 12. Indeed, the civil war in Syria has witnessed the return of chlorine to the battlefields for the first time since the First World War, as well as of sarin. Only this time, Syria is a party to the Chemical Weapons Convention. The step to take action under Article 12 is the latest in the series to have Syria come clean on its CW programs and to force it to stop chemical weapon attacks against insurgent and civilian targets. In June 2018, the OPCW voted to set up the Investigation and Identification Team, or IT. In April of 2020, it published its first analysis based on the findings by the fact-finding mission. The OPCW Executive Council, in response, issued a deadline of 90 days to Syria to come clean, which it failed. So now it has its rights and privileges suspended. Remarkable are the strong votes in support of the norm against chemical weapons. Comparing the votes in support of the IIT and the Article 12 measures, there were significant shifts. If I first look at the yes votes, and by that I mean votes that have shifted from no to yes, absentees and abstentions, then we can see that on balance, there have been 18 new yes votes, however, also a loss of 12. In other words, there was a net gain of 6 yes votes between both votings. If I look at the no votes, again, looking at how yes votes turn to no, absentee votes to no, and abstentions turn to no, well, then we see that there was a gain of 5 no votes. However, in contrast, there was a loss of 14 no votes compared to June 2018. So in other words, there was a net loss of 9 votes. I still need to verify the exact vote count, especially with regard to absentees and states parties who did not have voting rights at the time of the sessions. I also need to assess the reasons behind the shifts of individual states. But on the whole, the trend is clear, despite the efforts to discredit the OPCW and its work. Now, the vote was an important step. Definitely, the fact-finding mission and the IIT must continue their work, as must the declaration assessment team in eliminating gaps and inconsistencies in Syria's declarations. However, there is also a need to consider the future. Much of the debate on chemical weapons use takes place in the context of the OPCW, and its members have, by virtue of the treaty, Article 8, Article 9, and Article 12, the right to investigate breaches of Article 1 and decide on sanctions against the offending party. As history has demonstrated time and time again, coercive disarmament alone does not bring the offending party into the fold. With steps taken under Article 12 now, where do we go from here? The IIT has issued its second report early in April, just before the second part of the Conference of States Parties. The Executive Council will consider this report in July, and there will be more reports later. However, the time lag between the incident and the report will only grow, provided the current hold on chemical weapon attacks continues. Continuing sanctions for actions still farther away in the past may prevent any cooperation from Syria, as Iraq demonstrated in the 1990s. This is not a call for impunity, far from, but in establishing criminal responsibilities is a thing for the court. The one thing the OPCW cannot do, and that sets a limit, is expel one of its members as per the Chemical Weapons Convention. While the work by the Technical Secretariat must continue and Syria must come clean, I dare to call on the NGO community and states parties to start outlining an endgame, without forgetting the support for criminal trials of individuals involved, to restore the focus on preventing the reemergence of chemical weapons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zanders. We fortunately now have, I think, about almost 30 minutes for questions and answers. And thank you all of you who've already submitted questions up to now. If you still want to submit questions, please do so through the Q&A box at the bottom of your computer screen. To facilitate the Q&A session now, I will turn over the podium to my fine colleague and friend, Daryl Kimball, the Executive Director of the Arms Control Association. The floor is yours, Daryl.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you to Director General Arias and to our three distinguished panelists. As Paul said, we have about 20-25 minutes for questions from the audience. We already have a number of them that have come in, and for some discussion. And so as Paul said, please post any additional questions you have in the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many as possible. And if I could ask the panelists, if you could put your microphones on and come back onto the screen so that we can approximate an in-person discussion as much as we can. Thank you all. So let me start with a question that I think Jean-Pascal started to answer, and maybe you can elaborate, maybe Ambassador Helfand can elaborate a little bit, Ambassador Lingner, which is about the next steps regarding the Syria case. I mean, clearly this was a major effort, many years in the making, to try to hold Syria accountable for the documented incidents of CW use through the course of the civil war by the regime. Do you think Syria could accept, will accept, and cooperate with the calls from the OPCW member states from this decision? And if Syria continues to remain in non-compliance, both with respect to the use of chemical weapons and with respect to the incompleteness of its declaration, I mean, what other members can the OPCW itself take in the coming months? So Jean-Pascal, you started talking about this, but Ambassador Helfand, Ambassador Lingner, your thoughts about this this difficult and important question, please.
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, I have started thinking how the end game may play out, and I just want to be very clear. We are not yet coming to the end game as such. However, the big problem we face now with the way the politics have played out is that Syria has basically painted itself in a corner. Syria has not even admitted to a single chemical weapons attack. Syria has not even admitted to having a chemical weapons program. In other words, it becomes very difficult for an about face for a country, especially if international pressure remains strong or even intensifies on the country. So I don't know the solution right now, but it would be good in advance to start considering under which circumstances that actually a door is opened for Syria to escape from the room in which it is in. The second thing to think about in terms of the dynamics, having looked at previous cases of coercive disarmament, most particularly Germany after the First World War with regard to chemical weapons and its industrial capacities for armament on the one hand, and the UNSCOM experiences with Iraq. Both cases show how difficult it is to push coercive disarmament to its end. However, what will happen is that once the war in Syria starts winding down, the attention of the international community will shift, and other priorities are going to take over, including reconstruction, national reconciliation, and there will be new geopolitical realities and so on. And that means that we may again end up with a situation where chemical weapons are forgotten after all, because so far reality is not a single state has ever been condemned for chemical warfare since the First World War. Not a single individual has been punished for its involvement. So for that, I think also for maintaining the integrity of the CWC and the functioning of the OPCW, I think it would be good that we start thinking about it in, say, track 2 sessions or so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Helfand, any thoughts on this, further thoughts on this question that you'd like to make?
I would say, I mean, obviously our goal is to have Syria cooperate and disarm and come into compliance with the convention. What they'll do next, that's up to them. I can't, begin to put my mind into the mind of the leaders of the Syrian regime. But the important thing is that the OPCW has taken this step to clearly show that there's a marker and there's consequences. And will continue to do so. And we'll see what happens in the lead up to the next CSP. And the other thing to bear in mind that's also been mentioned is there's a whole network of international law and institutions that also have particular roles to play. The OPCW has a particular role, but so do other institutions, some of which are located in the city that I'm speaking to you from now. We'll see.
Okay. Thank you. Ambassador Lingner, do you have thoughts about how to move forward if the decision by the OPCW states parties does not have the desired effects?
So I same as Lisa Helfand, I would not be in a position to tell you what the Syrian government will be doing right now. The interventions of our Syrian colleague during the last CSP were ambiguous. She never said that Syria wanted to stop cooperation, but she kind of insinuated that cooperation might change. Now, what exactly that means, we will have to see. And I think in terms of what can be done in the framework of the convention, we are pretty much at the end of our possibilities with the application of Article 12. I'd like to add one thing to what was said by Pascal Zanders. I agree, no state has ever been condemned for use of chemical weapons. But nevertheless, the ban of chemical weapons use is very strong internationally. And this is a success story, actually. This shows how much the work of the OPCW and all states parties involved in this has brought some progress, because it is, I think de facto today, it wouldn't be possible for any states party to admit to using chemical weapons. The ban is very, very strong. And this is a success that we needed to defend. And this is also why we had to implement the convention. We could not just let it pass. But once we have done that, once we have applied Article 12, there's not much more that we can do in the framework of the convention. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me shift, let me just note that those questions I was just asking were coming in from Ambassador Aguilar of Mexico, Greg Koblenz from George Mason University. I have a couple of other questions about the case of Russia's alleged use of chemical weapons in the Novichok category. Andrea Stricker from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies is asking, what do you think is a realistic action for the Executive Council to take regarding this case? And Ambassador Piet de Klerk of the Netherlands asks, why hasn't any CWC member state requested a challenge inspection to the building in St. Petersburg where Novichok is likely made? So a similar question about this other disturbing case of recent use of chemical weapons. Which of you might like to try to address that question? Jean-Pascal, do you want to try to start, please?
Well, I can probably lob a ball and then hope that both colleagues on the panel can actually smash it. Let me state, it is a tricky situation because, first of all, here we have a case of the use of what I call a military type of chemical agent for assassination purposes. However, this was committed on the territory of the state party that actually committed that particular crime. And the technical secretariat cannot just go into a country. This is also one of the problems we see with Syria, that even in the hybrid disarmament regime that was created for Syria, Syria has always maintained the right as a state party to determine the mandate of whichever OPCW team went into the country. That is a big difference with UNSCOM. So unless Russia would open up its territory and invite OPCW investigators into the country, to the hotel where it happened, to for the plane and so on, I can't see how this is going to advance. Germany was only able, I think, to invite OPCW staff in once Navalny was in Berlin, and it was actually possible to have the people take samples directly from the victim. So it's a very difficult case to do. I have to say that before we go to things like challenge inspections, that the other procedures foreseen in Article 9 have not been exploited in terms of bilateral consultations in a more formal setting, or having clarification requests in a variety of ways. And that has been also in the Navalny case and in Syria, has been one of the big weaknesses in the provisions foreseen. But I'm sure that the people actually working, representing their countries at the OPCW, will have many more insights than I have from a distance.
Thank you very much. Ambassadors, any additional thoughts to add to what Jean-Pascal was saying on this question?
Well, I would just reiterate what I said in my remarks, that we're very concerned about the emergence of Novichok's as a real threat, and that after the attacks in Salisbury, we worked with others on the listing of 2 new families of the chemicals, and we're looking very closely and working with other member states about what to do as new variations of Novichok emerge.
Okay. I mean, I would add, just as my own observation, that the fact that the OPCW technical team, confirmed the initial findings of the German government does help, in a way, serve a certain deterrent effect by showing that the use of this particular chemical agent in a poisoning can be detected, and that can hopefully have a deterrent effect against its future use down the line. Ambassador Lingner, any other thoughts on this? Just wanted to give you a chance in case.
It's kind, thank you. Maybe just to confirm, yes, we were able to invite the OPCW experts only once Mr. Navalny was on our territory and in our care. And then, of course, we saw the immediate urgency and need for calling in those experts very quickly, because, as you all know, the detection of Novichok is very critical in terms of time. So the longer you wait, the more difficult and in the end impossible it becomes to prove the presence of these nerve agents. So this is why we actually we called them in immediately when it became that other laboratories. We are, as Lisa also said, very concerned about this repetition of Novichok use. I had one other thought, which now escapes me. Oh yes, the question was, what can we now do in executive councils or other fora in the OPCW with pushing for clarification? And I just think we should hold our Russian colleagues by their word, because I still recall a very dramatic request for technical assistance that was publicly made by the Russian ambassador during the October EC, when he stood up and walked over to the Director General and said, Russia firmly requests a technical assistance visit to the Russian Federation in order to clarify the situation. And actually, we all were quite happy about that, because it would have helped to have some answers, maybe. Now, unfortunately, after this very public request, negotiations between the Russian Federation and the TS went on and on and on for a very long time. Basically, in the end, which was in December, then in, I think, 16th of December, the Russian ambassador wrote a letter saying that a visit by the OPCW experts was no longer relevant. So basically cancelled the technical assistance. The reasons that he put forward were quite astonishing. He pretends that there were unacceptable conditions imposed on the Russian Federation. Those unacceptable conditions are actually usual standard procedure, like protecting the experts while they are on the territory of the state. So there is a certain a certain agreement on rights and privileges that has to be signed. The other one was that Russia wanted to work in Russian laboratories together with the OPCW's experts, which is not possible because they work independently and they like to do that. And the work is done by independent and anonymous, actually, labs from the designated laboratory network. So all these pretended unacceptable conditions were actually not unacceptable, but Russia still more or less cancelled. And what I find interesting is that during the last CSB, the Russian ambassador insisted that we all take out our notebooks and write down that Russia never cancelled the technical assistance visit, which is quite surprising when you read the correspondence. This correspondence is public, everybody can read it. So it was blatant, let's say, alternative facts. And I think what we must do is hold them by their word and remind every time we can the Russian Federation that they still have questions that they need to answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me turn our discussion to another challenge, which we really haven't addressed yet, but there are several questions coming in about the fact that there are still some declared stocks of chemical weapons that need to be destroyed, and there are some countries that have not joined the CWC that need to declare their stocks and have their join the CWC and destroy these stockpiles. So, I mean, one question from Dominique Anelli, a name known to many of you, former head of the demilitarization branch at the OPCW, is noting that 98% of the declared stocks of the CWC states parties have been destroyed, which is really the great success of the Chemical Weapons Convention. And Paul, let me direct this to you. If you could be ready to put your microphone on. I mean, what is the estimated timeline for the completion of the destruction of the declared stockpiles of the CWC states parties that still have some stockpiles. And we have the second question from Sangmin Lee from Radio Free Asia about how we assess the North Korean CW arsenal. North Korea, of course, one of the few states that is not part of the convention that is believed to have a large chemical weapons arsenal. So Paul, what is the United States doing? What is the timeline for destroying the remaining stockpile that we have?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Daryl. The United States, as many people I think on this call recognize, was the very first to start destruction of chemical weapons in 1990. So the United States has been working, carefully and persistently, as we say, for the last 30 odd years. Originally in a sort of bilateral and reciprocal way with the Russians. To date, the United States has destroyed, I think, about, if it's 31,500 tons, it's destroyed about 30,000 tons. So there's about US tons. So there's about 1,500 tons left at two sites, Pueblo, Colorado, which is all mustard agent, and then Bluegrass, Kentucky, which is every type of nerve and mustard agent. Timeline is sometime in the fall to late 2023. So it's about two and a half years, I would say, forward. And destruction has gone very well, but of course they missed the initial 2007 deadline under the CWC. They then missed, along with the Russians, the 2012 deadline under the CWC, which has extended the 5 years permitted. And the Conference of States Parties agreed for both the Russians and the Americans that they would move forward with with as much alacrity as possible. The Russians finished their first stage of destruction, the neutralization process, in 2017, which was great. And the United States has these last two sites, which are quite complicated and difficult from a technical perspective. We don't have time to go in with that. But I know we all are very happy and convinced that another 2 years will be very close to the end, and we can all, open a bottle of champagne and celebrate at that point.
All right, thank you. And of course, on North Korea, let me just refer Mr. Sangmin Lee to, there's an article that we published in our journal, Arms Control Today, on this subject about 2 years ago. We will note it when we post the recording of this session. That does go into some great depth from an independent analyst looking at North Korea's potential CW arsenal. All right, and then let me also turn to another question that's come in that relates to the future of the OPCW's work. Ed Levine, former Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff member, now at the Council for a Livable World, is asking about whether the OPCW and states parties would like to see inspections covering more industrial facilities in the future. With the destruction mission coming to a close, what are the main challenges facing the OPCW with respect to the ever increasing number of chemical weapons production facilities to make sure that existing countries remain in compliance? Jean-Pascal, do you want to take that quickly, and I'll ask the ambassadors if they have any additional thoughts from their national perspectives.
Thank you, Daryl. This is an enormously broad question, and probably we would need a whole day to discuss it in any
Yes.
depth. But let me say, because you focus very specifically on inspections and more chemical industry, I would say as an opening remark, and invite the other panel members to add or fill in more detail. I would say one aspect is indeed one of numbers of facilities, but this is probably not the most important implication. What we also see are the types of chemical facilities that, a number of decades ago were perhaps typical for the industrialized world. Many of these types of facilities have shifted towards third world countries, developing countries. In the meantime, developed countries have adopted new production processes which are much more modular. The production is in far smaller batches. There may be problems coming with reporting thresholds and so on because of those lower volumes. And the verification regime as foreseen in the CWC, the burden may shift more and more towards developing countries, bearing in mind the country receiving the inspection also pays for it. So what was foreseen in 1997 may no longer be there today. So this is just one quick answer to a much more complex problem, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Any thoughts, Ambassador Helfand, Ambassador Lingner?
I'd say, Dr. Zanders has set out part of the issue, but the other important thing is that the OPCW has to keep working with the chemical industry. They're important partners in all of this to learn about how exactly, as it's just been stated, they are changing their methods of production, and then to continue working with those states, especially those member states, where some of the production has shifted to.
All right. Well, let me close out the Q&A. I'm sorry, Ambassador Lingner, you had, I thought.
Okay, I will be very brief.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, maybe just to give you this state of play, more or less, between states parties. The magic number of 241 inspections per year doesn't seem to be questioned for now. I think that it will be very difficult to reach agreement. It has been very difficult to reach that agreement many years ago when states parties agreed on the number 241. So even though the end of destruction for the American chemical weapons program might liberate somehow resources, I don't think that automatically will mean addition to inspection numbers. What I could imagine more easily would be a shift between the different types of inspections, because you have Schedule 1 inspections, Schedule 2 inspections, Schedule 3 inspections. So there might be reason to move numbers within the all over number 241. Thank you very much.
All right, that's very helpful. Well, we're almost out of time here. I want to ask each of our panelists if they have any quick closing thoughts, especially with respect to the core question that we brought everybody together about today, which is ensuring accountability with respect to Chemical Weapons Convention violations. And then I will let everybody know about further details on this, where we'll be posting this webinar recording and other information available from the Chemical Weapons Convention Coalition. So quick closing thoughts, starting with Ambassador Helfand and Ambassador Lingner and Jean-Pascal Zanders.
I think there's a lot of amazing work that has been done, Nobel Prize worth work that's been done by the organization in the past 25 years, but there's obviously a lot left to do. The OPCW is not going to go out of business, unfortunately, in the next couple of years, and we'll be working with civil society to make sure that's done in the most efficient way possible.
Ambassador Lingner.
Yes, thank you. I am convinced that we have major work to do in the coming years. The fact that the first purpose of the convention, which was destruction, might be ended in 2023 does not mean that the work of the Opcw is finished. And the challenges we face become more and more difficult because of the chemical and biomedical inventions and developments. So I am absolutely sure that we must keep engaged, and that the new Chemtech Center will actually become the center of this engagement, and that we all can go there and meet there and figure out together how we can fight re-emergence of chemical weapons. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean-Pascal? Your microphone, please.
Yes.
Yeah, there we are.
Indeed, I would say I agree with the comments one of the other panelists said. It's the first time we have something like the OPCW. It's the first time we have something like the CWC. And this has changed the whole ball game, how we can deal with chemical weapons, a violation of the norm. What has also struck me at the same time, the Chemical Weapons Convention in terms of verification and investigation is probably the most detailed weapons control treaty we have in place right now. And we must recognize that much what it is in the Chemical Weapons Convention is based on the scenarios the negotiators had in mind at the end of the 1980s and the early 1990s. It's a completely different world from what we have here. At the same time, I am struck how much the OPCW has been able to show flexibility and an innovative mindset to deal with those new challenges that present themselves in new security contexts. So I think for the future, hopefully not, but if we are confronted with new types of violations, I think innovation will be part. There is now experience, if not precedent setting. Formally, it's not. But challenges will be raised to any change in the practice as envisaged in the Chemical Weapons Convention. These must be overcome. Fortunately, we have majority voting, and we have to move forward in dealing with those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of our panelists. Very interesting insights and principled observations. Thank you for your hard work on these issues. I want to thank my colleague Paul Walker for his partnership in working these issues and trying to reboot the Chemical Weapons Convention Coalition. This briefing, this webinar will be posted on the Arms Control Association website, armscontrol.org, and also again on the Chemical Weapons Convention Coalition website, which is now under reconstruction, but will be up within a month or so. As I think everybody listening to this session realizes, we have only really begun to scratch the surface of the many challenges and successes that we've seen with the Chemical Weapons Convention over the last quarter century and recent years. We have a number of questions that we were not able to address and answer, but this is going to provide us here at the Arms Control Association and the Chemical Weapons Coalition lots of food for thought about ideas for future webinars. This will not be the last. We hope to see many of you back again. We thank you for your attention and interest in these issues. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.